The playoffs continue as our remaining teams pursue the last slot to BlizzCon here for the HGC Europe division. My name is Trixler. Caldor joins me once again, and I have Glarong all the way down there on the left side. Glarong, how you feeling after yesterday?
Pretty dang good.
Yeah?
Yesterday we had some awesome games, so I can't wait for today.
It's going to get even better here, Caldor, today.
Yeah, as long as we don't see Lava Wave Ragnaros, I'm all sold.
I just want to point out really
you
quickly.
dodged that yesterday, so we have to come back to that. So guys, before we start with our games here, I still want to use the opportunity. I have a real expert that is to my left right now, not to my right. Please don't mix them up. So, Claw, your thoughts.
My thoughts on Lava Wave? Well, honestly, I think it's one of the best ults in the game. Competitively viable and should be first pick.
I'm
going to throw you off a cliff.
Caldor, you can't threaten the analyst after he gives you the answer that you didn't want. You can't do that. That's not how the world works.
You don't. What did you pay him since yesterday?
On top of that,
what
by the
changed?
way.
How much did he pay you? We need to at least share.
Well, Lava Wave's pretty awesome, though, Tim.
I get half of
Hamburger
it.
with no onions, right?
I get
That's what
half
you wanted?
of it.
We do have a 100% win rate with
both of them.
Lava Wave Ragnaros, by the way, in A and Z, as we did have DS actually grab the slot towards BlizzCon. So
I just have one
cool.
question. How often was it played in a relevant region?
Only once. That's all that matters. That's all that matters. Let's check out the playoff bracket here in Europe as we continue to move forward. Our second match of the weekend will feature Tricked Esports and Team Wish, as they'll be going to bat there to face off against Team Experts.
I'm salty now. But yeah, you're right. You lied to me. You betrayed my trust.
I'm sorry, Caldor. It was too good of a meme.
This friendship is broken now.
Caldor, man, you just
I can't even look at him anymore.
You hang on to the dumbest things, man. Just become part of it. Enjoy fire.
Who tweeted about it yesterday 3 times?
As we move into Team Wish, and of course, Tricked Esports facing off our players. They have other words to discuss besides how awesome Lava Wave is.
Practicing kinda hard for the playoffs. I feel like throughout the season we have performed pretty well and showed that we are a contender for the top 4. But once it came to the last few weeks, we just haven't performed as we want to. So we really hope that we end the season with a good performance. I feel like Wish have improved quite a bit over the season and shown that not only Polk is a strong player, but they, like as a whole, play with good HUDs. I think in our series against Wish, the biggest factor is gonna be our play. I think if we perform and they perform, we're gonna win the series. But if we perform bad and they perform bad, they are gonna win like with 3-level lead. I think it really depends from the day to day how we feel, like that's how we're gonna perform.
Thinking about Trick, the first player that comes to mind is Alex. He's a very strong leader, and their latest swap with Alex going back to main tanks makes it even easier for him to control the flow of the game, and he also gets a better view of how to approach the game from being in the 4-man. I have a lot of respect of Trick as a team, and especially Alex, which makes Trick the scary team to face. I hope that we play as well as we did versus Liquid, and that we can bring this series home as well.
This is quite the weird matchup to look at as we head into it. We know Tricked Esports, we're always uncertain what Tricked Esports we're going to get. And then you look over to Team Wish, and they're getting to a point where they're getting a bit on the predictable side, but to a good point. They play great heroes, as many people have stated already.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they become more stable by now. Because at the beginning of the phase, we had a very similar situation to Tricked, where they were also in a spot where you could have an on day, you could have an off day. You never really know exactly what you got. But they've been stabilizing a lot, and they play really solid heroes of the Storm at this point. And you can tell that, especially with players like Poik, they have just an ace up their sleeves where they can always bring out the Tracer, for example, and it's just devastating how good he is on those heroes. Whereas we have Marco, of course, on the other hand, for Tricked, but seeing those two going up against each other today, it's going to be good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see that matchup.
The Genji and the Grey main there for Make. Now, before we hop into it, of course, cheers continue to roll in as we get closer and closer to the HGC Finals. Tricked Esports now has a new leader at the very top, Gladman, with 10,500 bits at the very top.
Taking the top here, feels Gladman. Sniffers, Daces, Radish Head, and...
Yeah.
That's what I was about to say.
I like it. Snitch continues to be the #1 contributor for Team Zealots, also now known as Team Wish, with 20,900 cheers coming in, all the way down to Jerk Store for the 5th place.
It's an excellent name.
That is a name. Do you just go to a store and you buy a jerk and you take him home like, Caldor, please talk to this guy.
How do you think HGC came up with me?
We went to the jerk store and bought a Caldor. Let's go to Battleground number 1 in this best of 5 series here as we watch Team Wish and Tricked Esports. And, we are going to Dragon
This
Chair.
is a map I love.
Team Wish is coming out with cannons ablazing.
I love Dragonshire as a map. It's so cool to observe it, and so cool to see teams just trying to fight for the control over the objective. Ever since also the Dragon Knight got buffed, the earlier ones being more powerful, feels even more relevant. I love watching teams play on this map.
I feel like it really puts to the test the team's ability to rotate.
Yeah.
I think more so than most maps. You can make an argument for like Braxis or Towers of Doom, but I feel like Dragonshire is the map where your rotational play has to be on point if you expect to go far.
Yeah, coordination as well, because you have to control the 2 points, and especially if you are going up against a lot of globals, that of course just adds to the additional threat that you have. So I actually really enjoy that Dragonshire is the map right now. And I want to see if Wish can perform on the same level that they used yesterday.
Yeah, communication is key as we head into Dragonshire and we get this draft ready. Now, do note, before moving into it, if we look at history right now, these teams are 1-1 together. The first matchup had Trick Esport come out with a 3-0 victory. In fact, just straight up stomping Zealots.
Wow.
But into the next phase, it became much closer. Went all the way to game number 5 with Zealots taking the lead and getting a 3-2.
Yeah, but traditionally, as you said, it is a 1-1, but if you just look at the map score, then traditionally Trick is still doing fairly well against Team Wish. But we have talked about the consistency issues between the two teams. Now going into Dragonshire for the drafting aspects, we're of course talking again early on about globals, and since it is the European scene, also Abathur as a pseudo-global is one of those heroes that both of the teams are going to show a lot of respect for. We've seen Team Wish play a Tracer composition with Abathur over Tacita as he was banned out yesterday, so that is another added element to it. And Abathur already banned out here to at least shut that down. And at this point, when we're talking about Team Wish, of course, we are thinking again about potential ETC early picks, globals in general, maybe a Tacita ban here as well. And I'm curious to see how they are starting this day off, since yesterday we've seen them with a lot of bans against Genji, but today they are favoring Tacita to make sure that there's no double support composition.
Yeah, I wonder if the prioritization changed due to the Abathur ban, but we do see a first pick ETC coming in here from Trick. That doesn't surprise me too much. ETC is an incredible tank, and like the teams that love playing him will prioritize him in that first pick position all day.
Yeah, and that's in position right now. He can perfectly mirror the Haka if the Haka is being picked and move into a main tank role if Wish doesn't decide to go into the global hero. So
from the solo lane perspective though, ETC in that matchup, he can get pushed in. So there is some weaknesses in the draft if you commit to the global early on. The thing about ETC is he's so flexible, you don't actually have to put him in that global position.
Yeah.
Because like both of his ultimates have incredible merit and value, and they change the entire dynamic of the game, whether or not you have a mosh pit or a stage dive. So I think it's actually really cool. The early prioritization on ETC gives you a lot of control because you can draft a sort of composition where you can, you know, take a risk and wait for later in the draft to get a global and try and get a little bit more value in the moment.
Sure.
And that's how a lot of like really strong team fighting compositions will still end up seeing with the ETC pick, and then ETC just ends up flexing off to the off lane. Sometimes he'll be in the 4-man until level 10, and then he'll leave. But oftentimes, when we see ETC as that global contender, he doesn't always win the global matchup, but your 4-man tends to be stronger because you haven't had to prioritize globals in the draft.
The popular adjustment we've seen lately is that Arthas and the Dahaka, or the Arthas and the ETC, which you put Arthas in the top lane and then switch him out as you were mentioning earlier.
Exactly, like Europe has been running that for a long time right now, with ETC just offering the flexibility, and then you can still decide, okay, depending on what your opponent chooses as the offlaner, do I go into a traditional offlaner in addition to ADC and put him on the solo lane and then later switch on depending on the ult? And as Tim just said, Arthas is something with ETC that we have actually seen a lot, where Arthas at the beginning takes the solo lane, and then after level 10, if you decide that you don't need Mosh Pit, you just simply put ETC with Stage Dive onto the solo lane. Arthas rotates in as the main tank, and then the fights are of course dominated by ETC moving in once that Dahaka, if he's the counterpart, starts to use his global as well.
And honestly, the ETC Dahaka matchup into the mid to late game, it's really hard for Dahaka to channel his burrow. And so, like, ETC has countless interrupts, essentially. So you kind of got to play this game of chicken in the off lane where positioning matters a lot, because if you dig in vision and ETC interrupts and then stage dives out of your tongue range, for example, then suddenly it's a 5v4 for the ETC team and not for the other.
I mean, the newfound flexibility of ETC is the main reason why he's back in the meta, at least on the European side, because he wasn't really changed to an extent where you all of a sudden would have said, okay, he's back now, but it's just that people found out, okay, we can actually play him as the counterpart against the Dahaka and then mirror the global. So all of a sudden, his priority in Europe spiked completely. And with the early ETC pick, as we said, Trick is now fairly flexible. Whereas on the other side, we're seeing for Team Wish now the traditional Uther and Genji combo.
We saw this opener from them yesterday versus
Liquid.
That's right. Oh my god. Brain.
So this is actually something that we see in Europe right now a lot. If you go with an ETC as an early pick, your opponent is usually in the position where they really think about picking Uther away. Since Rhaegar is by most teams still prioritized as the most important healer, but Uther has the better synergy with ETC, and if you're in a position where you can grab Uther with ETC, you also have another avenue going down the Genji path.
Yeah, the Uther plus ETC is an interesting matchup too, because they work really well together, but then conversely, Uther has a good matchup into ETC.
Yeah.
So it was like good for Team Wish to pick it up for sure.
And if you go for Uther here, then of course Genji is an immediate pickup as well, and they have their Genji player, so.
For me, I was wondering if we might get that Uther into Haka for Team Wish, usually having that for Zarmi in the top side, but they take away the Genji instead, which we've seen in the past. Make can run very well on that Genji. Would he have picked it into an Uther? Probably not, but not a bad combo for Team Wish, especially what we saw from them yesterday against the Team Liquid, as you guys mentioned.
Yeah.
I think one thing that Wish might be thinking, by picking the Uther Genji on the 1-2 instead of prioritizing that global like you had mentioned, I think that's largely due to the fact that Tricked already has the ETC, and that could flex into the global. And it doesn't necessarily mean ETC will be that global, but Tricked doesn't have to prioritize the global anymore. And then at the same time, because Wish knows that Tricked is no longer going to prioritize that global, then suddenly they can prioritize Teamfight Heroes high as well. So the Genji pickup is actually really intelligent.
And also for Team
they
Wish,
could pick up a global now.
They love to play with Sonya and with Zamini on either Sonya or Malthael, so that's another option. It becomes a little bit tricky on the other hand if Trick decides that they are going into the Haka on top of it. That's something that we see a lot from, or have seen also from Dignitas, for example, that even in early rotations they go for ETC plus the Haka.
I mean,
it's
that's
also
so
something
scary
that showed up yesterday. Exactly. So all of a sudden you have your global, but you have ETC in the 4-man rotation.
And that's still so strong.
Especially if you are, for example, running a second stun after ETC, because in the 4-man you have the power slide, a Tyrande follow-up, a gravity lapse, any kind of additional stun that come in afterwards allows your damage dealer to just go completely ham on the target and could deliver the early on kills.
And having Vala Rhaegar already, it just allows their mercenary pressure and siege pressure to just sort of snowball out of control. Rhaegar, from my perspective on Dragonshire, is one of the best supports simply due to the fact that he is so excellent at PvE.
Yeah.
Like at 2 minutes, if Rhaegar's off the map, it's fair to assume that he's doing a camp, and then you try to invade, but the camp's already done.
Yeah.
So it's like he just puts a timer on the map in the early game.
And we're basically seeing exactly what we talked about just a few minutes ago. We have, first of all, for Trick, this combo between ETC and Arthas that you mentioned. So we are most likely going to see Arthas take the solo lane and ETC later on taking over. And on the other side, Team Wish was, of course, very well aware that if they don't take the Haka, there's a really good chance that Trick opts into him. So they are now picking the Haka for their solo lane for Zarmini, and Johanna is going to be the main tank, whereas Trick Esports makes sure that with Rhaegar and Vala, they're also adding the second support, which in this case is Oriel.
So one thing I'm curious about, I understand the ETC Arthas synergy that we've discussed within Europe, but I almost wonder if after seeing the Dahaka Johanna rotation, Trick Esports could have considered a Malthael, and then when they do make that swap, ETC goes to the top lane with stage dive around level 10. You don't necessarily need that main tank force all the time on Dragonshire, so having a Malthael in the 4-man could actually be very useful if it ever came down to a situation where Johanna was contesting bottom point or anything like that. He wins that matchup, and also it would be a winning matchup for the early lane. So I think the Arthas is a bit curious in that regard, but we get to see a KT here, or KTZ. That's really good.
Wow, and KT has been nerfed for this patch too, so he's a little bit weaker, but exciting to see.
Is that the new way? It's the KTZ now?
I feel like KTZ is a good way.
I'm just going
that's the way my team does it. We say KT and KTZ.
I'm going always just full Kel'Thas and Kel'Thuzad right now.
Yeah, see, but that's so difficult. That's the thing. It's so difficult. It's like
it's not that bad. I mean,
in comparison to KTZ, Kel'Thuzad.
You dodged the entire controversy.
Hearthstone enthusiast.
People are gonna. I'm not.
You had to bring that in there.
Just no.
Yeah, KTZ is way better. Like, if you're gonna say Kel'Thuzad, include all of his titles. Come on.
All of them?
All of them?
How many were there?
It's like 9 or 10.
There's like, you gotta commit one way or another. You gotta either go KTZ or all the way.
I'm going down the mid lane.
Okay, that's fair.
I think the mid lane is the best way, because there are people that have very aggressive opinions on how you should say it. They go in.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty ridiculous.
The whole controversy, who is the real KT? Oh my god, when I saw that pop up, I was just like, okay, I'm out. I'm going Kel'Thuzad. I'm not gonna get tangled up in that web.
Well, controversies aside, let's go and talk about the draft. Who got the better draft here, in your opinion, Caldor?
I think from a draft perspective, I actually really like what we're having for Trick right now. It's very traditional, very standard for European meta, what we're seeing, and it's also very Tricked esports, Arthas for Alex. I'm actually a bit surprised that he didn't get banned out, to be honest with you, since most of the teams, at least in Europe, with Trick ban out Arthas against Alex because he's just so strong with it. But then again, I feel if Kel'Thuzad is going to be interesting in that particular setup because we haven't really seen him in Europe too much, and usually he starts to struggle slightly if the pressure is on the Kel'Thuzad team. He excels when you can push with him. So right now, because it's an easier to execute draft and it's our first game, I would actually say that the draft of Tricked for the first game, I like it more just because it's a little bit more stable. It's a little bit more, okay, let's test the waters and see what we got here today.
How about you, Glarong?
I was rooting for my dark horse yesterday. I'm rooting for him again today. I'm going Team Wish.
You abandoned them in the last series, so you
I
can't
did.
use that. You can't use that anymore.
Okay. Well, Team Wish.
Actually, you are the betrayer. You betrayed
Dude,
them yesterday.
He's one of my best heroes. Come on.
That's what he does.
He betrayed Team Wish yesterday, and then he betrayed me today when we talked about Lava Wave. So yeah, you're the new betrayer.
But that makes him enjoyable to watch. Glarong bringing in different opinions. You know, it's uncertain. It's great. It's good.
I don't know what you paid him, but I want to find out, and I'm going to match it.
I like Glarong. Now going into game number 3, when it comes to the draft, I'm excited to see how the new KTZ is going to do in this matchup as we move into Dragonshire. It's Team Wish taking on Tricked Esports, and they want to see who wins here to go on against Team Expert.
Game number 1, ladies and gentlemen. We have Tricked Esports going up against Team Wish, and to the left, Knappe for Tricked Esports. On Rega, we have Remaballer. On ETC, Crosby on Vala with a ranged DPS. Alex, of course, once again playing Arthas, and Make today on Oriel.
On the right side, in the red, Team Wish. We'll have Mopsio playing the Johanna. Grandpa will be playing Uther. Going to have Dahaka played by Zarmani. Shad will be on Genji. And Poik will be your Kel'Thuzad player for today.
Yeah, and Kel'Thuzad is going to be super interesting here. First of all, we are, of course, in the patch where he already got slightly nerfed. And so far in all of the games where we have seen him, he's incredibly powerful and can definitely one-shot any kind of hero, especially after, of course, you complete your quest. But the one thing where Kel'Thuzad really excels is if you are able to push. He's incredibly powerful with any kind of composition that can heavily push in and try to siege up against an opponent. So if Team Wish grabs a Dragonite and Kel'Thuzad is part of that push, then it's going to become very tricky for Tricked Esports to defend against it.
I am curious to see how Tricked Esports will be able to get on top of that Kel'Thuzad, though. ETC with Stage Dive later on could be very helpful to get on his back line and burn him down. When KT is actually dived upon, his ability to deal with that push coming his way is quite limited. Of course, you have to hit the chains. There's also the Glacier Spike you can pick up at level 7, which will be helpful, but if you miss that, you are a dead character, especially even with the Uther being back there. Maybe Divine Shield can save him, but still, I'm worried.
He's definitely really squishy. It's one of his biggest problems overall that he can be jumped upon quite easily, and that is something where Team Wish needs to make sure that they have enough protection ready for him to keep him alive here. Trick, by the way, in the early game, already extremely aggressive, making a push in the mid lane happen with 4-man, where they are simply taking on the first tower. I want to highlight again how strong their setup is when we're talking about camp control later on, after the 2-minute mark, when we have the Siege Giant camp spawning, with Vala going into an arrow build, starting of course with Monster Hunter, and the Lightning Bond on Rega, even adding to that additional camp clear pressure that they have. So they're going to try and sneak in those night camps and Siege Giant camps whenever possible.
Looking over to Kel'Thuzad here, getting Barb Chains at level 1. Looking to finish that Blight quest. As soon as he does, he'll be able to reduce the armor of his opponents by 15 for 4 seconds, allowing for, of course, additional damage. But, of course, looking for that Blight to be finished up. He does have a nice proc on the early side there, up increasing the damage by 125% on the chains initially, but nothing too insane until that quest finishes up. So we'll keep an eye on that quest that is currently at 1.
Yeah, exactly. And also, while we're talking about the strengths of the two teams, let's highlight again the flexibility of Tricked Esports. They have currently, as expected, Arthas up at the top lane in the solo setup. But with ETC, your thought process most of the time is that you can mirror Dehaka after level 10 since you go into Stage Dive, or that at least you have the option to choose Stage Dive. So what we see most of the time when ETC and Arthas are paired on a map that demands a solo laner, Arthas takes on the solo lane up to the point where ETC has access to his heroic ability, and then he has the option of switching with Arthas. Arthas joins the 4-man rotation, and we have ETC taking over the solo lane, where especially with his Echo Paddle on level 7, he all of a sudden has the power to also match the wave clear to an extent that Dehaka has.
Very curious to see when that will pop in. As you look at Team Wish right now, they've been playing pretty defensively, especially in that bottom lane. They've put Johan in the top a few times to help out against that Arthas, but so far, not very much kill potential between, of course, Dehaka and Johanna to kill just an Arthas in himself. So Trick Esport has taken the opportunity to push out the middle wave. They've opened the gate, they've grabbed the turret, and it looked pretty solid on the battleground, but nothing too explosive quite yet.
Yeah, for Trick in particular, Crosby is of course the main damage dealer here, and he is in a setup where he is protected by 2 frontliners and 2 supports, so he can be quite aggressive with the stance that he takes on the map here. And that's always the point where Vala really starts to just synergize extremely well with Oriel. If you are in a double support setup where Oriel is part of the equation, Vala can be incredibly aggressive, can be out there and dish out the damage, which of course generates the hope for Oriel then to even have more of an impact with their healing power. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So Crosby is going to be very aggressive. And it's also something that you should always remember for your own games. If you play a hyper carry Vala, or Lunara, or Tracer, make sure that you have those supports with the damage dealer, because that's the whole thought process behind it. Your damage dealer has to be able to really move in deep without exposing himself too much to being sniped here, and the 2 supports keep Vala alive right now in that rotation at the bot lane.
And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that your solo lanes can handle themselves. And speaking about handling themselves, Alex Aproji will be ganked by 3 members from Team Wish, and he's going to be able to walk behind his gate, but Shad, diving past, will be able to secure the first kill of the game.
Really well done by Shad here as well. I thought that Alex was more or less safe, and then we saw that quick jump in here, gets the kill, confirms it, and with the reset, of course, he can jump out. Now, ETC moved over to the top lane immediately and made sure that in this case, he is able to soak the experience. And we have actually a talent on level 7 for ETC that I want to highlight real quickly, because he went into Pinball Wizard. So that in itself is already quite interesting, but it's even more so interesting if you think about how usually Echo Paddle allows you to keep a solo lane. So already they're highlighting that, first of all, we might see Mosh Pit, but even if he goes into Stage Dive, he is willing to give some of that Echo Paddle wave clear up in order to get just the extra damage after the face move.
300% additional damage, of course, after a power slide comes in. So Pinball Wizard will be looking to combo with that face melt right afterwards. Now, Trick Esport and Team Wish continue to be close in experience and move towards a level 9. But so far, the struggle for Trick Esport to control the shrines hasn't been too heavy, as they've controlled them a couple of times. The main concern is they haven't had a chance to pick off a kill or even move in to grab that dragon. Now, of course, with level 10 around the corner, that changes for both of our teams, which we should be seeing pretty darn soon. Now, I am curious to see when Poik is going to be able to finish his quest. Right now, he's still at 9 stacks.
Yeah, he's sitting at 9 stacks, 5 minutes in. Now, we've seen on very aggressive and small maps, Kel'Thuzad players completing their quests around the 7 and 8 minute mark. In this game, it should definitely hit quite a bit later than that, just simply because we haven't really seen too much brawling yet. So for Kel'Thuzad, it makes it a bit more difficult to get the stacks together. But Poik has already shown quite a bit of pressure here, especially the chains being his main tool have been really dangerous to Trick. And Trick, so far, have actually done a pretty decent job to always spread out once that they realize that this would become an issue in the fight.
And what else they've done pretty well, too, is they haven't ganked that bottom lane too easily, which gives it easier chance there for the Kel'Thuzad to hit those chains if they can't get the kill in, which gives them more stacks. They've been putting more pressure on the top lane.
Now, also, keep in mind that we talked early on in the game about the camp clear that exists on the side of Trick, and they already used that quite significantly. They have taken a Siege Giant camp for the bot lane. That did have a bit of an impact, nothing too crazy yet. But they've also just committed to the Night Camp to the top, which is going to help ETC to push the lane even more. So now that we have Stage Dive, that rotation that we pointed out earlier between Arthas and ETC has now happened. ETC takes the top lane now that he has the global and can commit to a global dive once that Zarmany burrows in somewhere. But with also having Rhaegar and Vala with Monster Hunter on the map, they really try to focus on these camps now to put even more pressure onto the lanes. So that's something that Trick tries to control the macro game overall.
And so far, it's gotten them at least one shrine on the bottom side. They are trying to establish themselves in the middle as they push forward and allow ETC to know, okay, if we have a chance here, you can go in for the shrine. He starts to move on up. But with 4 people in the middle, Team Wish is set up for major defense on top of that statue. Now, at the same time, they're going to grab their giants in the bottom right, which might come to bite them here if Alex Aproji can scout it out. He does, moves on in, and decides to pull away.
Yeah, it doesn't commit too much just yet. They don't really want to force the fight, especially since Kel'Thuzad, of course, excels in these narrow pathways. So they don't want to give him, first of all, the opportunity to get the easy stacks.
True.
And also to simply commit to the AoEs overall. But at the same time, Trick has taken their own talent. And keep in mind, Alex hasn't really taken his 10 yet. he could still go into Syndragosa. Normally we would expect him to go for Army here, but if they feel they have some... Normally Syndragosa is a talent that you either take when you are behind and you are trying to make something happen and you YOLO it a bit. Trick has done that against Team Liquid in the past, successfully I might add. But it's also a nice talent when you try to snowball. And I feel against Kel'Thuzad in particular, it could also have a lot of an impact if you lock him down even further, as we've highlighted early on, how vulnerable he can be if you catch him.
Curious to see if he'll pick that up. With 2 supports being on his team, you could make a case for it. But again, with it being Dragonshire, there are a lot of times that you go to the late game, so having the Army of the Dead could, of course, help your team out. And they haven't really had a chance to snowball yet, but that will come when they are able to grab the Dragon. And they're trying to grab one now. They move forward, Alex and Prodigy in the middle of the lane, Chains coming out, hitting multiple members. Alex and Prodigy taking some damage, does pick up Syndragosa, he's going to go for it. Flying out right on top of Mopsio, Cleanse popping in, but Mopsio will have to have a Divine Shield here just to live.
Divine Shield committed to, and with ETC jumping in, the Haka is now controlling the top lane and was able to get that shrine. So Syndragosa being used, and a lot of heroic abilities have been committed here. Stage Dive and Strafe, but all 3 of them not having the impact they were hoping for. They baited out the Divine Shield, which was definitely important, because now, if it comes to a fight, Kel'Thuzad is also going to be a lot more vulnerable, since Uta can't use that quick panic button. And it also, of course, puts some pressure or some potential plays away from Genji, who's also waiting for that Divine Shield in a fight so that he can pop off with the Dragon Blade.
Trick Esport sitting up on the bottom side while Team Wish comes in to contest the bottom shrine. Dahaka is on the top side and gets 13 for his team. So Trick just around the corner from that 13 themselves aren't going to be able to fight too heavily, and they're being careful as they move in. With Make sitting on the shrine, this could be an indicator towards Dahaka to maybe come in.
9.5 minutes in, Poik currently sitting on 14 stacks with Kel'Thuzad, so he needs just one more to at least have the ability cooldown reduction. We have the teams both on level 13 already, and that means that for now we have Johanna again with the Burning Rage, and we're seeing also Gloom chosen for Vala, making sure that Kel'Thuzad has a bit less of an impact against her.
You need that. If that combo comes out on Vala, you gotta slam that out instantly, or you will be dead. So get picked up there by the Vala. Seeing some Tempered by Discipline sometimes as of late, but definitely in this situation against a Burst Mage, you gotta grab that Gloom, or you are actually hurting your team. You might get picked at any point, no matter how good of a player you are.
Yeah, exactly. Even with the double support, it just can happen so fast that burst damage is insanely strong. So in this case, just making sure that Vala stays alive a little bit longer, that gives the 2 supports a bit more bigger room also to get their own spells through. Nice dodge again by Alex, but here comes already a quick Dahaka move in. Isolation used against Draka. They're trying to go for Alex once again. Arthur's in a bit of trouble. Dropping Syndragosa, slowing everybody. ETC jumps in with the stage dive, and they're trying to isolate Zarmany, who's already using the brushes to just rush away here. Both of the teams trading cooldowns, but none falling yet. 10, 11 minutes into the game, and only 1 kill thus far in favor of Team Wish.
Aegis and Ancestral Healing is up, but so is Dragon Blade and Divine Shield for Team Wish. Shadow Fisher coming out, not connecting with anybody here. The Blight stacks continue to come in at 15 now for Kel'Thuzad, so he has hit the first point of the rewards, being that the cooldowns on his abilities will be reduced by 2 seconds each. Alex and Prodigy continue to step on forward, and they will control the bottom shrine. But look at the top lane. That's where Team Wish was getting some value. They had the mercenaries pushing in with the minions to put damage on the fort.
Yeah, the camp is pushing the fort heavily, and that's a problem for Trick Esports, since they're also losing a retreat point that they can use to control the shrine at the top lane. So with the Haka now starting to commit to it, this is definitely taking one of the outposts of Trick Esports away from them that they use to get a bit more top lane control. So Rema Baller finds himself also in trouble, and he is going to fall here for sure, unless Knappe could now commit to Ancestral. Does exactly that, and they're starting to move in. Zarmany from the back with a quick burrow is looking for a drag, but Stravala already with a strafe as Mopsio is attempting to escape, and Poik with the chains over and over again, locking the opponent down, but it's not enough to keep Johanna alive this time.
Johanna getting caught there, almost a little bit fearful. I thought Kel'Thuzad might be able to get some decent damage in there with that being a choke, but Trick Esports finding the kill was what they needed here. They send ETC to the top, and he has stage dive so they can grab the shrine.
Poik already on Kel'Thuzad has committed to the Chains of Ice on level 13, so he adds an additional slow after the Chain stun expires, and that just helps him with overall more control against the opponent. And Team Wish has taken a slight lead in experience, but they are now starting to really feel the heat here, as Tricked is starting to become a lot more aggressive, and we will see the first Dragonite captured here in the mid lane. Knappe commits to it, one of the 2 supports on the DK, and now of course Syndragosa is going to get even more value for Trick Esports.
Solid play there by Alex as well on the bottom side, stopping of course Dahaka and Kel'Thuzad from pushing him off the shrine so Nappa could grab the Dragon Knight. And they are gearing up to push on the bottom side. 16 will be awarded to them when they clear out these minions. There it is. Team Wish has set up a trap with ETC lingering behind. Trick Esport will be in a 5v5.
Yeah, and at this point, they're actually springing the trap even a bit early. Mopsio is moving out, already using his own Iron Skin. There might be a problem. Here comes Syndragosa, slowing them down, and Mopsio has no defenses at this point. They might have to commit to the Divine Shield, as we have Grand Paquette with the ability ready again, but he doesn't use it. Lets Johanna die instead.
Seems as if the call was made that potentially Mopsio could get away. Does not do so, and this will hurt for 30 seconds. Johanna is not up on the field, meaning that Team Wish is missing out on their main tank. Arthas is being dragged underneath the tower, but the keep will fall as Nappa and crew go grab it pretty darn easily. Team Wish potentially chasing forward, but without a chain connecting, I would advise backing up, and they do.
Yeah, the cooldown for Divine Shield was just ready a second before Johanna died, so Grand Paquette definitely had the time to throw the ability out, and he must have known about it, so it feels like a deliberate decision to let Johanna die and just simply risk it. But that also cost them the keep here, that they would have arguably lost even with the Divine Shield being used there. So they save the cooldown for now, have still the option of using it with Genji, but they had to sacrifice the keep at the bot lane. And that first Dragon Knight definitely paying dividends for Trick Esports.
A slow game, but finally here as we move to 14 minutes, we get the keep opened up, and that will be quite the issue for Team Wish. Luckily for them, they do have Dahaka, so they can clear out that bottom lane as need be, and spread out resources throughout the rest of the map. They're going to grab Night Camps here, and start to answer back as much as they can while they have the talent level similar to their opponents, but Zarmany comes in for a fight, gets put against the wall, and has to escape.
Yeah, Crosby a bit trigger happy here with his own heroic, goes straight for the vault, but so they can still move in. Strafe has already been used. Here comes the stage dive. Could get the slow in. Zarmany in trouble, but the Divine Shield this time being used as we see Genji commit, but he doesn't have the Divine Shield. He needs to be careful. Zarmany is already low as we have Syndragosa rushing through the field, slowed down as well, and Dahaka is going to fall here. Zarmany is down, and they are still on the chase against Mopsio and Shad. Good power slide and a quick detainment strike by Auriel, commit to the second kill, and that is the end of Johanna. Double kill against their frontliner, Team Wish.
Trick Esport thinking about a chance to go for the core, decides against it and goes straight to the fort. Gotta be a little bit careful against Genji with the Dragon Blade, and of course Kel'Thuzad also at the same time. There is pressure on the top side. Make getting low on health, goes down to about half HP, but just fine with Nape healing on up. The fort at the top does fall as well, with Trick Esport really starting to open up the map.
Yeah, Tricked after that first Dragon Knight, and with it already, has done so much work here. Now, first of all, they've taken the bot fort and keep. Now they just, with the camp, were able to take down the top fort as well. They are protecting their own fort at the bottom lane, which was pushed by Night Camp, but they're also now getting kill after kill. And this is really initiating a snowball here in their favor, where they have now 4 kills against 1. They are on level 19 against Team Wish, who is sitting on 17.5. So in talents, the two teams are on eye level, but it's really that looming level 20 that is going to become an issue. Especially with Vala likely going into the Farflight Quiver. We have Will of Heaven on Auriel on level 16, so an extra 20% attack speed for Vala, and that alone is already absolutely fantastic. If you have the range or even Rancor, that damage output is just going to increase by a lot. Especially since talking about safety and talking about control during fights, with them opting over Manticore into Frostshot, they have even more control and also chase potential.
Now they do there, that slow will really help out. Now Trick Esport came to the bottom side for a little bit to slow down Team Wish and grabbing that shrine, but again, they're not looking for anything major. Unless they can get a free dragon in the middle. Team Wish at the same time though is looking for a fight. They want to engage. Rimmer comes up from the top right, drops down a power slide, gonna have Dragon Blade going in. It's Chunkinaux approaching. He's getting lower while isolation prevents him from self-healing.
Vala is down. Fantastic tools used here by Trick, by the way, to try and keep her alive. But in the end, the focus of Team Wish was enough. Here comes Syndragosa. ETC is down. Trick Esports still committing here. Alex is in trouble. And there comes once again Kel'Thuzad. Poik is putting on a clinic, dropping Arthas and eliminating Make as well. Trick had a chance to move away as Vala was falling, but they went in again. And now they have suffered 4 deaths against Team Wish, but the core is under pressure as Wish already lost 20 points. And that camp, plus, of course, the catapult, are continuing to do damage.
Did they commit because they thought they would get the damage on the core, and that's why they went in for it? It felt really odd to go for that full-on fight, especially with Rimmer dying.
I really feel it could be that was the thought process here.
Okay. Because it felt like that was the only angle they had. Okay, we'll get damage on the core.
So the big problem was Vala was actually caught in the middle, and you could really tell how everybody was trying to keep her alive. There was a lot of lockdown with Kel'Thuzad in particular against her, and it was actually a fantastic Ancestral that was used to keep her alive at first.
Sure.
Then there was even added pressure, and Genji focused highly on Vala, but we had Oriel save her again. And then after all of this was said and done, Vala moves away, tries to use Gloom here, but in the end she falls. And Vala being the main damage dealer, once she's down, normally you would expect them to retreat. So that reinitiation was either them hoping to turn the tides of the battle, or just simply realizing if we stall this out, our opponent is going to suffer a lot of damage here. And whatever the decision was, the end result is that the Dragonite has been picked up by Team Wish. We have 65% on the core for the red team, and both of the teams are now on level 20 talents, which of course means that we have even more control for Trick, since they now have access to Absolute Zero as the upgrade for Syndragosa. We're also seeing the Crowd Pleaser, and now Farfly Quiver is going to make it way easier for Vala to stay alive in the backline.
We'll see if Trick Esport can continue this defense here. They have about half the duration on the Dragon left, also half a health bar as they would continue to move in for this keep. They kick away Arthas, who is currently in the position to control that Dragon, and this keep is starting to fall here. This is a pretty late game Dragon, around 18 minutes, so it's doing some decent chunk of damage, especially with Poik and Chad helping out, and there it is, the keep falls. Syndragosa has been called upon. Trick Esport is looking to fight.
And here comes the stage dive. Hits a lot. Good cooldown reduction on there, and already Genji's in a bit of trouble. We have Poik immediately trying to lock them down with Kel'Thuzad, but so far not successful. Alex, they want the kill against Mopsa, and they're starting to move in. Zarmani is also in a bit of a pickle here, as we see Remaballer with the power slide going straight for him. Zarmani is low, but Vala is down, and that was perfect play here by Team Wish. The damage deal eliminated as Shed commits to the Dragon Blade, goes in, gets the second kill. He drops Rhaegar, and they are going straight for the camp here. Fantastic turnaround by Team Wish as Trick Esports tries to chase them down.
That could have been worse if Shadowfisher was up. 7 more seconds, but the Frost Nova connecting with 3 members, helping Team Wish go in for the fight. Of course, Genji of helping out as much as he can. Stage dive comes out as we have 3 members up for Trick Esports for defense. Just kidding, they only have 2 members up for defense as the core continues to be focused. Team Wish is looking for the win.
The big problem with stage dive, if you go in and there's a stun right afterwards, you are locked down, and now we are seeing Team Wish turning the game around, going straight for Trick Esports core, putting it down to 40, 30, 20%. This game is over as Team Wish is taking game number 1 against Trick Esports.
Team Wish playing a slow, methodical game, falls behind against Trick Esports, but in the late game, they win a team fight. They get the pick on Vala, and from there, they continue to move forward and stop every advancement from Trick Esports. Glarong, how did Team Wish do it?
Woo, that was insane. All right, so I was like, a little bit, it was a melancholy feeling seeing the KTZ stack up a little bit slower than anticipated in the early game, but like it really came together in the mid to late game, I'd say. Like the combos they put together with the Genji and Poilk on that KTZ, it was actually just wild. A really, really interesting game. They fell pretty far behind early game,
sure,
but like they kept their composure and took the team fight that they needed to right. And we're actually going to go into that team fight right now. It was right before Trick hit level 20. So they actually end up stalling the DK perfectly with Mopsio here. And if we can pause right now, I'd just like to note that combo that Poilk just did on both the Vala and the Arthas was like so critical to winning this team fight, because you can see the Genji use that follow-up to just, as we can slowly move through this clip now, you can totally see it as a perfect follow-up for Genji. And it's just like, at this point, it's like the dream team fight for Genji. He's able to get some resets, but Kel'Thuzad got so much damage off in that team fight, so huge props to Poilk. And then watch this combo on ETC too. He's patient enough to hold the chain until after the WQ and pulls him right back into the combat and finishes him off. It's actually just really impressive coordination and play from Wish all around.
That was actually the fight that we talked about quite a bit as well, and they committed basically all of their resources to Vala, but as you highlighted, with Kel'Thuzad just locking her down early on, she never could escape and then she died. And the big question here for me is, why does Trick re-engage into this fight? Because to me, that doesn't really make any sense. Your main damage dealer is gone. Your opponent is sitting pretty in a position where they are looking extremely strong. EGC is in trouble. Maybe he can escape. Probably not. But even if he dies, they lose 2 heroes. They are still ahead in experience. They might be able to stall the Dragonite until the others are back. But that fight turned everything on its head. They have nearly a 2-level lead at this position.
They didn't need to take that fight, to be completely honest. It was just a hasty decision, I'd say, for them to actually go for that Dragon Knight cap. What they alternatively could have done with the global pressure and the pressure their strong 4-man that they had was just like dance around one shrine, control it, and then the instant you hit level 20, you can pressure with that level 20, get that DK, and you're already up a keep due to that Syndragosa, and then you can just like end the game. But it was a little bit of impatience, but like huge heads-up play to Wish for recognizing that team, that there was an overextension, they punished it. It was really good.
It just felt so weird to see, because now in the clip, at the beginning when we saw the fight turn around, I was afterwards wondering, okay, how far was Alex already gone from the fight? Were they really forced into it, or how many people were in trouble there? But if you now see it again in the replay, the two supports are basically at the gate already, so they're safe. Arthas is to the top left, and he turns around and walks back in as they see that ETC might also fall. So it felt like an attempt to save ETC, but then they end up losing 3
and
more
those sort
heroes.
of miscommunications can happen, especially when you provoke a little bit of chaos into the game. Like the instant Wish took that team fight in the mid lane, that kind of messed with Trick's head, I'm sure, a little bit. They lost a team fight, things are a little bit chaotic, and then they see ETC in a situation where he cannot be saved. But in that situation, it's really hard to make that call to say, hey, look, we got to just let you go and prepare for the next play.
Now, we were thinking about the 2 camps that were pushing the bot lane and the catapults. Do you think that maybe Tricked overestimated a bit how much damage the catapults would already do to the core and said, let's take the fight, we're going to get value out of it? Because, I mean, in the end, the shields fall on the core and also 35%. So if that's a fight that happens, let's say, 5 minutes later, I can see the catapults do significantly more damage. Do you think that played a role in the decision-making, or do you feel it was just a panic moment that they just said, let's re-engage, and that didn't even occur to them?
So from my perspective, when I look at, like, I have my own theories on what's optimal, but I think that waiting for the catapult pressure and using the catapult and giant pressure to pressure the DK, which was what Tricked was planning on doing, is fine in theory, but I disagree with that decision simply because of how close they were to level 20.